Die Zukunft der Arbeit startet mit dir. Ganz egal, ob du CEO, angestellt, selbstständig, auf Jobsuche oder im Studium bist. In der Arbeitswelt von heute stehen wir alle vor denselben Herausforderungen. Wir sind umgeben von Ideen und Konzepten zu Future Skills, Digitalisierung, Mentoring, verantwortungsvollem Recruiting und künstlicher Intelligenz. Also gehen wir sie gemeinsam an. Wie beeinflusst mentale Gesundheit den Job? Wie müssen sich Unternehmen verändern, um ihre Mitarbeitenden für sich zu begeistern und zu unterstützen? Und wie baue ich mir mein eigenes berufliches Netzwerk auf? Darüber wollen wir heute sprechen, um miteinander und voneinander zu lernen. Education, Transformation, Action.
It is very bright. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the session on Germany as a global talent magnet, shaping the future workforce. If you're just joining us, please come on in. You're welcome to walk down the front aisle, however you want to take a seat. I'm very excited. We have about 39 minutes and 51 seconds for our conversation, so I'm going to get right into things. We're going to look today at how Germany can position itself as a top destination for international professionals by addressing the challenges of recruitment, integration, and retention of global talent. In our discussion today, panelists, we want to look at strategies for attracting immigrant and migrant entrepreneurs, enabling seamless hiring of remote talent, and enhancing the journey through policies that address factors like bureaucracy, which we are all very familiar with, housing, of course we're familiar with that, and also personal networks. I guess we don't need that light. We're also gonna look at how technology, inclusive policies, and hybrid work models can transform how Germany tackles its talent shortage, while also creating a more tailored experience for foreign workers who contribute to the country's economic and cultural vitality. Joining me, starting from the left-hand side of the stage, is Ana Alvarez. You are the founder and CEO of Migrapreneur. You're an award-winning entrepreneur and consultant specializing in social innovation and migration. You're also a mentor for incubators and accelerators, and you were recognized as an EU future leader and one of the 20 most influential people in EU tech in 2023. Thanks so much for joining us today, Anna. Next to Anna, let's give her a round of applause. Next to Anna is Felix Steffens, the co-founder and COO of WorkMotion. After graduating from the London School of Economics, you worked as a management consultant for the renowned Boston Consulting Group and as an early stage investor at Global Founders Capital. Welcome, thanks so much for joining us today. And seated right next to me is Max Heywood, the owner of Internationale Fachkräfte. You worked in international environments, so NGOs and startups in Berlin for about 15 years, and since 2023, you have been focused on supporting the transformation of the German Mittelstand in the regions of Saxony and Saxony-Anhalt. So welcome, thank you also, Max, for joining us. A round of applause for our panelists. So we're going to get right into things. I'm going to repeat our topic. We can see Germany as a global talent magnet, shaping the future workforce. I want to ask a question, one question for each of you. We'll start with Anna to reply. From your perspective, what are and let's maybe limit it to one of each, the biggest opportunity and the biggest challenge facing Germany in becoming a top destination for international professionals? Anna.
Well, the opportunity that Germany definitely has is because Germany needs people. Undeniably, people are pensioning more and more every year. And it can be an exciting opportunity for Germany to be open. The struggle we have is a growing anti-immigrant sentiment, the denial of turning things, bureaucracy in a much more easy way, and digitalization. And mostly, basically, another big challenge is the language, which might prevent different other sectors to adapt quickly to a market like Germany.
Thank you so much. Felix, the biggest opportunities and the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I'm going to go right in with a very pessimistic view. So in my view, Germany is not a talent magnet. It's quite the opposite, to be fair. And that's actually a fact, right? There have been a lot of studies with expats in Germany, ranking Germany across many other expat destinations, and Germany continuously ends up at the bottom of the list. And the reasons are actually quite obvious. You have very, very high tax rates, income tax rates, especially for high achievers. You have bad weather. Yeah. Unfortunately, unfortunately, the housing situation is terrible, particularly in the big cities like Berlin, Munich, and Hamburg. You don't really have a welcome culture. Germans are not particularly known to being super open to foreigners, so all of that comes together, and I think that we have a huge problem. And as you said, we remain in denial. It reminds me a little bit of the climate change, and it's slowly becoming a little bit too late to act. So we really, really need to do something. And now the optimistic version of that, realizing this is, of course, also an opportunity that we have to change something, and I think we can.
Thank you so much, Felix. Max.
Yeah, thanks. So I'll start with the optimistic spin. So there was a report in The Economist about a month ago where they did one of those brainy surveys they do across many countries. And Germany came out fourth in the world in terms of its attractiveness to graduates worldwide. So only after Australia, Canada, and the US. So it came before France, before the UK, before New Zealand. And they asked these graduates, which country would you choose if you wanted to move abroad permanently for work? And so Germany came number 4. What's that? So Germany came number 4. So let's say that despite all of these challenges, which absolutely are present, the overall, let's call it country brand of Germany is still incredibly powerful. The challenge, I think, is to recognize the problem as the problem that it is. So just to give an example from last week, there was a column in the Handelsblatt, so a very respected newspaper in Germany, by the chairman of the board of a major insurance company, hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. And his argument was that Germany does not have a lack of workers, of Fachkräfte. It has a lack of people who are willing to work. I'm making some brainy arguments around the average hours worked in Germany and that Germans work less hours per year than Sweden, and basically denying the problem, saying the solution here is for people to get less sick, and to call in sick less, and to work harder. And just a moment's thought, this makes no sense. If you're in a small town in Brandenburg and the doctor just retired, everyone else in that town can work double the hours. It will not generate a new doctor magically. But still, this is an argument that still has a lot of traction, especially in business conservative circles. So I think it's important to recognize that not everyone agrees with the proposals that we'll be having today.
All right, thank you so much. And I do want to say, the best part of my job is when the panelists up on stage have a conversation, and I want that to happen. And if someone does say something on stage and you want to react, give me a sign and I'll be sure to bring you in. Because you did say a couple of things that I think we want to, one of the panelists wants to discuss. So I want to give her the opportunity to do so. Anna, please.
Can I ask who of you are here non-Europeans? Raise me your hand. How many of you are from Latin America? Do I have anyone from Latin America? You. Awesome. From where? Oh, we know each other. Do we? Yes. All right. I'm not from Venezuela anyways. I mean, we know each other. Of course, I'm kidding now. We go to the same place. So here is the thing. There is always a perception. When we come from regions like Latin America, there's always a perception of Germany. We grew up thinking that Germany is the big place to go. And unfortunately, that's also a colonized mindset that we have, that we are always less than the rest. But when we come here, we quickly understand that we also have to give a lot. And I think that these quotes, I know that you were not meaning what this insurance company was saying, but it's so important that we use these panels and we use the voice of everybody who's working very hard in this country to visibilize their work. Because the anti-immigrant sentiment in this country, which is connected with the lack of welcoming culture, which when I arrived to Germany, this welcoming culture existed. And that's what enabled a big chunk of Syrians to find a way in. But this welcoming culture lasted only for 3 years. And my worry with this anti-immigrant sentiment and these type of comments from somebody who's in a very comfortable position, and let's not forget that next year, many of us are gonna have a raise on our payments to the Krankenkasse, because again, the insurance companies need more money because there's not enough people. And guess who's gonna pay for that? Us, the workers, us, the freelancers, us, the small companies. We're gonna feel it from next year onwards. So I think that having this opportunity to say it, but to not even put them in the list and let's ignore them and let's take over this media. Why they're not listening to the voices? Why they're not putting anything about the 12,000 Syrian doctors that arrived in 2015, specialists that are now in German hospitals? Why we give a space to people like him and not to people ones that are working really hard in shifts because they don't have enough doctors in this country? And yet, we keep undermining the labor force that also the Arab people are for this country, for instance.
Thank you so much, Anna. I mean, please applaud if you want to. Yeah.
Just because you mentioned doctors, I think at the same time we have to ask ourselves why so many of the medicine graduates, the doctors that get their education in Germany, are leaving and going to Switzerland. Yeah, Switzerland is the #1 destination for German graduates to go.
Absolutely, but what about the ones who are here? The ones who came already as doctors, did the Fahar, did the extra mile, the ones that are coming from Latin America, the ones that are coming from Kenya, the ones who are coming from Philippines. These people are doing an exceptional job to integrate into the society, right? So I agree. I mean, there's people who are leaving. I was reached out yesterday by the government of Canada, which they want to promote people to leave to Canada. And I have a lot of candidates in our community who are planning to leave Germany eventually. Look, we can start talking about people leaving Germany, but Germany needs people. The economy is going to collapse without any one of us. And so can we focus, I don't know, what can we do for Germany?
Okay, then let's pick this up because I do want to ask, because I don't want this to just be a bad news. Like, I don't want us to come and commiserate and be like, oh, everything here is so terrible. Because I also think that, I mean, I'm not German, I'm not from here. And I don't know how many of you, we asked how many people can you raise your hands in the lights? How many of you are not from Germany? How are you, many of you are part of that global talent out there? I mean, and I don't want to hear, you know, I live here, I have a kid, I have a job, I have a husband, I have a rental contract that is from 2018, and I do not want to give that up. So I'm also, like, I think we have to work to, you know, to keep things, we have to work to make sure it's okay here. So can we talk about, like, specific things? What policies, from a policy level, what policies do you see missing that can, in your various sectors, that can attract talent domestically and internationally, and then retain that talent? Like, what things are missing? Max?
Yeah, so I think the key question here is to filter every policy through this overarching need. So this is known as, you know, policy coherence technically. So just making sure that every policy is geared towards that overarching goal. And just to give you a couple of examples here, the famous 49 euro ticket, which is now 58 euros, and you know, but it in itself was a huge attraction factor for Germany and also for expats who are already here. So for my the business that I'm building, I'm interviewing expats, doing structured interviews. I recently interviewed an Argentinian who, in that time, visited every Bundesland in Germany except Saarland. And this is just one example of how much people, you know, got around in that time and enjoyed their time in Germany. And yet, when you see the debates about this ticket, it's all about the cost. You know, how much is this going to cost the Deutsche Bahn? How much is this going to cost the taxpayer? When this is a critically, you know, success factor for international migrants. Similarly, with things like culture. Many of the networks that people build when they get here need some sort of structure. It's very difficult to make, you know, informal networks in a vacuum, even if it's the local pub with a quiz night. But often what you find is that people are building their networks and communities around subcultures, you know, heavy metal, theater, all kinds of different subcultures. And when you see that, for example, there may be cuts to culture budgets next year, this is also something that should be seen through the lens of what is this doing for our attractiveness as a country and as a city, right? So just a couple of ideas to kick things off.
So policy, speaking about specific policies, give us the 49 euro. I mean, I would really love the 9 euro ticket back. That was a glorious summer.
Yeah.
But so 49 euro ticket and don't cut cultural policy. But what does that do to, like, I think there are, like, I want to hear from the other panelists. Felix, what do we need on a policy level to attract and retain talent?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a very holistic perspective here, but I can share one policy at least that I'm aware of that many other countries have in place, because my company, we are all about remote work and workers in other countries, right? And a lot of other countries have tax rebates for immigrants. We don't have that in Germany. I think there was a discussion just a few months ago in July or so about potentially implementing something like this, but there was a huge backlash. But it's something worth considering, right? So in many countries like Italy and Spain, Netherlands, UK, the list goes on, immigrants get tax rebates for like 5 years, tax cuts, and that of course helps, right? And we don't have that in Germany.
But unfortunately, that came late. That's an amazing idea, and that's something that Germany should have done some time ago. But in times of the race of the right wing, it's not a good idea to start a conversation on that, unfortunately, because the immigrants are going to pay the price that are always going to be perceived like, oh, there's so much that is being paid to immigrants, and what about us, and da. So let's say that this is, from my perspective, this is not the right time. Germany lost that opportunity some time ago. Like Netherlands, they implemented it like, what, more than 10 years ago?
So what can Germany do? What does Germany need to do?
Not kidding. What can Germany do? Well, first and foremost, I think I know that it's not going to be possible to reopen the conversation again, but Berlin was in a really good pathway to basically have a cap of rents, because basically the housing is also a big issue. But they really need to open up that conversation because Germany is becoming very, very expensive. The tax part, it would be amazing, but I don't think this is the right time, unfortunately. And I think most importantly, what every other country is basically trying to do, and it's easy to apply for visas in Dubai or Canada and so on, digitalize the processes. And yes, they also need more funding, and they cannot continue prioritizing in other things except the country. The job center is receiving less and less money every year. There's a lot of people also who are unemployed, who needs also training. There's also amazing great opportunities in the job centers through the Bildungsgutschein or through the educational vouchers, and not everybody knows that this exists. But every year, more and more, the German government cuts the budget of the job centers. In fact, the Bremen job center stopped having money in July this year. And so those already are signs that the German government should be prioritizing an education to those who are already here, those who want to upskill and reskill, and be more flexible in a more lenient. And I mean, right now we're talking about AI. I don't think the government is even thinking about it, just in a very simple platform or whatever, but trying to be more digital, to bring digitalization to processes when it comes to immigration, to make it a bit easier for people so they don't have to wait for months until a job center, until an Ausländerbehörde, the immigration office, answers for their visas. So they can do way more, but I think they definitely need a plan where, an altogether plan, a country plan, if Germany really wants to make this happening.
All right, thanks. I wasn't sure if you mentioned this. Did you mention the opportunity card? Are you all familiar with what the opportunity card is?
Which exists in Canada already for many years. Yeah. And I don't know if...
is the audience, are you familiar with the opportunity card?
Which is a point system?
Yeah.
More or less. So it's a point system based where anyone, let's say, who wants to work in Germany can come to Germany. So it's basically easy. Hi, Bruna. Anyways, I'm always happy when I see this girl. And basically, one of the points systems is like you basically can learn. I mean, when you learn German, that's a certain point. If you find a job, it's also certain points. If you also find education, but also you learn German, C1 level also gives you the opportunity to have a permanent residence here. But at the same time, who can come and apply for this opportunity card? You need to have already a basis of income to demonstrate that you can live in Germany for 1 year. And that means around, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's around 13,000 euros a year or something like that. So who has that amount of money to come to Germany? That's basically the question here.
Yeah, and then it also allows you then, you can come here for a year and you can job seek. And if you have an Abschluss from a university here, then you get 18 months. I want to move now to a different topic. You mentioned remote work. And I have here, it says that you think that remote work is the future. Why do you think that's the case?
Yeah, no, it's not going to particularly help Germany as a country or Germany as a state, but at least it's helping German companies and particularly German startups, right? So I'm in the startup ecosystem myself, talking to a lot of other founders, and everybody is struggling to find talent, right? Particularly here in Berlin, it's very difficult to find top engineering talent, for example, yeah? And the solution to that is actually quite easy. It's don't look in Berlin, don't look in Germany, look outside, yeah? And after COVID, a lot of companies have adopted remote work. We all know that it can work, and you have fantastic talent elsewhere, and you don't have to look that far away. You just have to look to Spain and to neighboring countries, and that can be a solution, yeah?
You brought up remote work, and I have a couple of numbers. Are always really obnoxious to bring up on a panel, but I want to do a couple of numbers about remote work. So pre-pandemic, in 2019, 13% of Germany's workforce worked remotely at least 1 day each week. And in 2022, that's when the last statistics were provided, almost 1/4, something like 24.3 or 24.7% of the workforce worked remotely at least 1 day a week. And that is actually up from 2020. So now we're looking at 1 in 4 people works remotely at least 1 day a week. So that is a thing that's happening. I was just reading yesterday about an initiative that Tulsa, Oklahoma has started. And it is also, it's remote work based. But the idea is move to Tulsa and work remotely from Tulsa wherever in the world you want to work. And you get $10,000 if you stay for a year.
Yeah. Some other European countries also have that. For example, Italy has also a policy that if you move to rural Italy and to specific regions like Sicily, for example, as an expat, you get a lot of money. And I've actually had friends of mine doing precisely that because of that.
It's kind of, good food there. Yeah. I want to come back. You said the word expat, and I want to come back to the word expat for a minute to talk about, to talk a little bit about that word and make sure that everyone is using that, like that we all understand how it is that we're using that word. We've used the word expat, we've used the word migrant, and we've used the word immigrant. And I think those three words mean different things. So I want to take a second to clarify what we mean by each of those before we start talking about those things. So I think you said expat first, and you also said expat. I'd love to know, for you, what is an expat?
Yeah. So, yes, very important to clarify.
Briefly.
Thank you. So, yeah, so sure. So an expat is usually understood as a person who is living outside of their country of origin for work reasons. So originally it meant just someone who lives outside of their country, so expatria, but it has more commonly become accepted that it's for work reasons to distinguish them, for example, from students or asylum seekers or people who move because of a partner. So, but it is a broad, it's contested, as they say in the literature.
I'd love to know, because you use the word expat, I'd love to know what you mean with expat.
Yeah, I pretty much have the same definition, actually. Yeah. So, we are a remote company ourselves. We have roughly 200 employees spread across the world, and a lot of them are actually based in other countries, but they are also expats. Yeah, they are not locals. So we have a lot of German sales managers living in Barcelona, for example. These guys are expats.
All right, thanks. You didn't use the word expat.
Absolutely never.
Before I ask you to talk about migrant and immigrant, I do want to talk about that word for just a minute. My job, I am the arts coordinator at New York University in Berlin. Yes, there's a dépendance here from New York University. But before I did that, I came here on a stipend. I'm originally from the United States. I came here from a stipend. And I went to school, and then I got a job. And so I was in Germany for work and was referring to myself as an expat. And I don't know if any of you are familiar, we're in English here, so I think it's appropriate to talk about the English Theater Berlin. They used to have something called an Expat Expo. And they changed the name because I think that the word expat is a difficult word to use because it often comes along with, like, I'm an expat. Because it is a colonialist term. And I think it's important to understand that an expatriate, there are lots and lots of people who have come to Germany to work that might not be tagged by someone here in the audience or someone on stage as an expat. And I think it's important to understand if we talk about expatriates, maybe we need to say these are people who have come here for a distinct amount of time to work, and then and they are also immigrants.
So can I make the explanation? Please. So expat is a name coined by the British colonies when they were basically colonizing India, Australia, and so on. So it has a colonizer connotation in order to identify British and white people in all these countries. Immigration or migrants is by the IOM, the International Office of Migration. It's an umbrella term to identify anybody who moves to one country to the other or one place to another and settles economically, culturally, and socially. An immigrant is a person who goes through immigration process. A refugee is an immigrant, but not every immigrant can be a refugee because a refugee is a person who is seeking for asylum and is fleeing out for very adverse situations, and they don't have to go through immigration process. So migrant is an umbrella term, and it should have been a way to humanize and identify everybody at the same time.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that. Thank you for these clarifications. I want to do a little bit more numbers just to understand a little bit about the where we are. We talk. You're based in Berlin. You're based also in Berlin. I'm not sure if you are also based in Berlin. I'm based in Berlin. I want to make sure we aren't just in our little Berlin bubble, as fabulous as it is. Like, there's a lot out there in the rest of Germany. Germany has a population of like 82 point something million. Roughly 20.2 million people in Germany in 2022 either moved to the country themselves or were born to two people who had moved there, which means 1 in 4 people kind of has like that term, which I'm not a huge fan of, a Migrationshintergrund, but it is important to understand this is a country of immigration, And this is a country whose economy can continue to run because of immigration. And so I want to look now a little bit at this question of some of the challenges faced by people who are here. And so I'd love, when I address this question to you, Max, I'd love to know challenges faced to expatriates compared to other types of what is that?
Yeah.
When it comes to the idea of people moving here to work, what kind of challenges do they have that policymakers need to better address?
Yeah. So I think it's great you're bringing up the option, the example of Berlin, because I wanted to bring exactly, so for work I spend a lot of time in Sachsen-Anhalt, where there are many, many factories that provide goods and services worldwide and that are also seeking working migrants. And there are some severe challenges. And I think what's important to recognize is that the challenges themselves are similar. What changes is the intensity of each. So for example, in Berlin, we mentioned housing. There are towns in Saxon where you can find a great house with a garden for the same price as a tiny apartment in Berlin. The challenge is your network, where you're going to find friends as an expat, how you're going to integrate into the community. So it's important to recognize that even though the overall, let's say, package of challenges is similar, what varies a lot is how intense they are across locations. And I think one thing that's important in terms of attractiveness of Germany as a global talent magnet is that the point that we were making earlier, which is that not everyone that moves for work plans to stay indefinitely. And this is not just about Germany. This is a fact of the life of people who move for work. If you move to a country for work, you can also leave it when you get another job. Or you can find a partner, or you can break up with your partner. There are multiple reasons why people move on, which have nothing to do with, in this case, Germany. And I think it's important to bring this up because when we think about integrating, for example, migrants in general, which is a big part of the discourse in Germany, I think it's good to question, from a policymaking perspective, how applicable is that to working migrants? How much do we need to integrate those working migrants, especially in the first years? Is that a priority for them if the only thing they want to do is focus on their career? So you have cases, people I've interviewed and spoken to where, it didn't work out in Berlin. 6 months, a year into the job doesn't work out, and they moved to Amsterdam, they moved to Brussels. And integration, they didn't even get to the stage where they wanted to integrate into the community. So I think it's important from a policymaking perspective also to say that for many migrants who come for work, integration is not in the early phase the top priority, and how to address that is perhaps the question.
There's a lot to unpack there. I want to think about a question for a minute, but Anna, I did see you nodding your head if you want to respond.
No, I totally agree, and I wish the German government will see the whole process like that. Because when they launch this amazing attractiveness that you can get a citizenship for 3 years, it's like, no, this is not what makes people come. What makes people move to another country is to get well paid and to get an amazing job and an amazing opportunity. And yes, if you want to learn German, if you want to integrate and go through the whole path, it's because it's part of your personal development. And I really want to go back to what we really, really talk very little. A lot of the things that we're talking about is also related to tech, right? So people who have the opportunity to jump here and there. But what about those who are moving to work in construction, in healthcare, nurses? And so I think that treating everybody in the same pot, in the same way, is basically where I think Germany is missing the opportunity to look the whole process with a bigger overview.
So what does Germany need to do?
Be more open-minded.
I think it's about developing what we could call, I was going to say expat journey, but let's say working migrant journey, and thinking about the whole process, not just about the beginning. You have this term Willkommenskultur, which in itself is about welcoming someone, which you usually do at the beginning. So there's this very strong focus on the early stage, but what keeps people in the country is the entire journey that they plan to go through, which may be for 2, for 5, for 7 years. So there are surveys, the survey I think was the one you were mentioning, shows that most working people, migrants worldwide, also known as expats, they don't leave their country saying, I'm leaving and I'm never coming back. It's very rare. So very often the time horizon is up to 5, up to 7 years, and then they plan to move back or to move on. So with that in mind, it's important to think of what is the career path we want to offer people during those 5, 7 years, and how might we get them to extend career path.
Felix, I see you sitting there, and I want to come back to you and give you. I have a question for you, but I want to see first if you want to respond to anything that your fellow panelists have said.
Yeah, as I said earlier, right, my view is more not so much about the socio-political environment and what we can do there, but more about what companies can do, right, to deal with that reality that talent is missing, and yeah.
Well, then let's talk about that, because how do you see, like, how do you see hybrid or remote work evolving? What would long-term implications be then for global talent recruitment? Like, what does Germany need to do in terms of supporting that?
Yeah, I think first of all we need to stop having this theoretical fight between office culture and remote work, and they are not opposing poles. There's lots of opportunities for hybrid models in between. Right, as I said earlier, I consider my company to be a remote company, but we also have a small office here in Berlin. We also have a small office in Cairo, and I do think, for example, that face-to-face interaction, personal interaction does matter. Yeah, but you can ask yourself the question: what is more valuable? Is it that typical conversation at the water cooler in the office where you're just like, yeah, how was your weekend? Good. How was yours? Good. Thanks. Bye. Or is it more like meaningful interactions that you want to have with each other, that you can have, for example, in offsite events? So we organized our first company-wide offsite event recently, where we flew everybody in from all over the world to Athens and had a great time there, and people loved it. Yeah, and I think that makes us a much stronger company with a stronger culture than other companies that just live their day in the office and do not really care about culture.
No, I think it's fantastic. Please, I'm not going to attack anything what you're saying. Don't worry. Careful. Don't worry. Chill. I'm not going to do it. And but what I want to say is, like, that's what I'm meaning about the making sure that we talk about everything as it should be. We have different sectors. That works perfectly in tech. I keep saying it. That works in tech. But not everybody works in tech. And that's where I think that we should be more open and more broad when we talk about who can manage these things. And I also want to clarify that also Migrapreneur, we don't only work on the social part. I mean, this is my personal agenda because I'm an expert in migration and I've been spreading this word for the last 9 years. But we also support anyone who comes to Germany. In fact, it's going to be available for everybody now by the end of October who comes to Germany to basically ease their way to enter Germany and to get access to experts and services like banking, insurances, and so on. But we also have a nonprofit where we keep our promise to those migrants who are still living in Germany and needs upskilling and reskilling in areas like tech. And then from the next 2 years, we will start with AI, for example, training people in AI.
That's what I want to address next is the future. But because I know that we only have about 8.5 minutes left, before we get to my last question, I first want to ask, does anyone in the audience have a question that they would like to address to our panel? I see one hand right here. I see another hand right here. Thank you, Drew. Would you kindly state your name and if you have a question for the panel or for a specific person?
Hi, Claire Dorsey. I have a question for the entire panel. It was an interesting talk. I feel like I would love to be left with a little bit more positivity about the future of work, so to say, in Germany and outside of Germany. To distinguish between the private...
Can you please sort of hold your mic close to your mouth?
Closer.
Yes, that's
okay,
great.
There we
Perfect.
go.
Thank you.
I was worried, Okay, so I would like to ask a question about distinguishing between the public, the private, and the social sectors, and each individual ecosystems and how they're actually attempting to look at work and get work in Germany and or using their networks to, with a German company, have work outside of Germany. So we know there are some public policies that are being funded for immigrants. Maybe they're not enough, maybe they're not as strong as we'd like them to be, but they are there. Maybe it's just a listing. Maybe you can give us some idea of what organizations you know of in both private, public, and social who are doing these efforts so that I can look them up later and say, oh, cool.
Please.
Thanks for the question, because I was going to bring this up in the future. So I do have a pretty strong opinion about this, which is that I think that these public, private, social sectors need to work together at the local level. So I see this every town I go, where you have the private sector meeting and then you have the public sector meeting, and they're working separately. When people move to a town or a community or a city, they see it as a whole. They have a whole experience. As you have your employer, but you also go out, you have the culture, you have, you need support from your hospital. You're seeing it as a community, and yet you can't generate a meaningful strategy at a very high level. Each location, for example, if your major factory in that location is making valves is different than if it's making, let's say, batteries. You're attracting different types of workers from different types of countries. So what is your strategy going to be as a community with the public, the private, and the social sectors working together to say, this is the career path we want to offer, this is the community we want to build to attract people in this sector? And I think that would be the way forward to work across those sectors.
Do you have specific names?
Of?
The person who asked the question wanted to know specific things, like specific names, places they can go look up, of organizations doing this.
So I was recently in Dessau, which is famous for the Bauhaus, and they're taking steps in the right direction. So they organized a great event a month ago, which had people from the private sector, from the public sector. They had breakout groups with people from all over the community, including the university, and they were having discussions that were starting to go in this direction. So I would, as a first step, I would say the town of Dessau is an interesting one.
Today's also, I think, a really great opportunity to, yeah. Anna, did you want to reply?
Amazing, you nailed it. Because one thing is what the German government can do, and the other thing is what Germany as a country, that also involves all of us. I'm a migrant, hello, I'm also part of Germany. What we all can do, right? Of course. And so, so all of it. We cannot work in isolation. Private companies, tech companies, the government, the social sector and organizations. Now, what is the difference there? I like what you said, and that's exactly what it works. I'm a migrant, and I went through the whole process, and that's why I created what I do, because I lived through it. And something that we do at Migrapreneur, and we believe a lot, is in the local-based support. And for me, the local-based support is absolutely important. These days, migration is way different than it was 9 years ago. And something that we do and we believe strongly is to work with local communities and local influencers. And what do I mean by communities? Who doesn't know in Berlin, International Women in Berlin, for example? Who doesn't know all these communities, especially for the Spanish-speaking La Red? There are so many amazing communities with more than 30,000 members that are not necessarily like NGOs or like Vereins and so on. This is how people are getting access to information. And we are very happy as Migrapreneur to connect private companies and also the government to understand how to work with communities. We have done it, and thanks to that, projects like we've done in the last year, we have had an amazing reach of 1 million migrants in Germany, thanks to these communities. So again, it's time to learn how migration is doing and working these days, and we're happy to connect you with all these amazing communities locally that are amazing number of them, from WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups, Facebook groups that are doing an amazing work in helping people get access to the information that usually it's impossible with websites that, quite frankly, it's loaded with information nobody needs.
Thanks, Anna. Also, check out Migrapreneur. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Ayan, for those who don't know.
I think you're also like the moderator for this whole thing.
Yes,
so,
I'm the moderator
so
of
please,
the whole thing.
It's great
So
that you're, yeah, please.
I really have a question because, we talked about the government and low situation and et cetera, but what about the society itself? So Germany is not Berlin. Let's face that. And Berlin might be quite open-minded for anyone who comes here. But what about those who live not in Berlin, but anywhere else in Germany? How do we get the society to a point to integrate those expats in the society?
This is a really fantastic question. I'm from the United States, and probably all of you know that there is a very important election coming up in a couple of weeks in the United States. And I think that the German election that's going to be coming up next year is an incredibly important election, because I think this is the most important, one of the most important questions to ask is, how do we change society? I very firmly believe in democracy, and I very firmly believe that, for me, the right decision is, now that if you are, I have a citizen of the United States, but I'm not a citizen of Germany, and I really believe that it's my obligation to become a citizen here so that I can vote to make sure that parties that have progressive, inclusive goals for Germany and for Europe come into power. And that is only one tiny voice, but I really hope that everyone here, if you're an EU citizen, I think you can vote in specific elections. Please vote in specific elections. If you are a US citizen and you have not yet turned in your ballot, please, please, please mail that immediately. And then please.
Yeah. So just a quick thought on that. I think it's really important to not let these voices dominate the conversation. So I was recently in an event in Magdeburg in Sachsen-Anhalt, similar to this, talking about migration. I was on the panel with the local salsa teacher from Cuba, who's been there for 10 years, has written a book about the salsa scene in Magdeburg, which I can highly recommend. And he was saying, in all his years in Magdeburg, which is in Sachsen-Anhalt, he has never had a bad experience. So I think it's also important to tell these stories of people who are actually doing, well, who are well integrated into the community, and who are also well received and accepted and are actually leading figures in their communities. You see these stories all the time that are not being told, and I think it's really important to not just push back against that narrative, but also to tell the stories of positive migration in unexpected places.
Please.
Yeah. I don't have a specific answer to your question, but I have a somewhat optimistic view here because I think we have to change things in the right direction because we simply don't have a choice, especially if you look at the rural areas of Germany. So I can tell anecdotally from our portfolio of customers, right? Our customers are all early adopters. These are mostly tech companies, as you correctly said, right? That are adopting new ways of work, like remote work. Not so much the German Mittelstand, which is based in the rural German areas, yeah? But they will come and they don't have a choice, yeah? Because they will run out of workforce and they will have to ask themselves the questions that we are asking ourselves here on stage in Berlin. So I think this lack of other opportunities, lack of alternatives, will us at some point hopefully get into the right place.
Thank you so much, Felix. Thank you so much, Max. Thank you so much, Anna. I really wanted to have a moment to have our a final word, but I think that the best thing to do now is for those of you in the audience to approach the speakers afterwards if you have more questions for them. Thank you so much to my panelists on stage. Thank you for being a fantastic audience, and have a great rest of the day.